I'm going to pass this over to Laura. She's going to read the bios, and then we're going to pass it off to the ladies.
Hi, welcome everyone. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Laura Dethelson, parliamentarian here at Conservative Women of the Mainline, and I'm so excited tonight to introduce you to our speakers tonight. We have Miriam Weaver, aka Macarena, or Mock for short, and Amy Jo Clark, co-founders of the popular podcast Chicks on the Right. I was just saying, my mother-in-law listens to you guys every single day, every day. That's exactly how she starts my conversation. Before becoming a Chick on the Right, Amy Jo, or Daisy, was a medical writer and communications consultant in the private sector for over 20 years, as well as an adjunct professor of communications. She grew up in the South and considers Dolly Parton, Julius Sugarbaker, and Joan Rivers her spirit animal trifecta. Currently, she lives on a small family ranch in Texas with her husband, young daughter, the original Chicklet, 2 dogs, Astrid and Cash, and 2 Brahmin steers, Gunner and Choppy. She's also a proud stepmama to 2 wonderful stepchildren. Miriam, or Mock, used to work in human resources prior to becoming a full-time Chick on the Right, focusing on recruiting and hiring and avoiding the task of firing and employee relations as much as possible without getting fired herself. When she's not podcasting with Amy Jo, Daisy, she co-hosts the Mock and Rob radio show weekdays 9 to 12 in Indianapolis. She's the product of Polish immigrants who came to the United States in 1969 legally and taught her what it means to melt into the great American pot. Mock is the proud mom of 2 preemie boys, the eldest of which has severe cerebral palsy and the ability to melt even the coldest heart with his smile. Her youngest son is setting her up to be the worst mother-in-law ever because no girl will ever be good enough for him, what with his total brilliance and killer good looks and incredibly charming personality and whatnot. I love those intros. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over.
Okay. So a lot of people, when we do speaking engagements, I feel like the biggest question that we get, even though we have done an entire podcast on this, which is episode 21, it's like somewhere between 21 and 23. You could kind of look for it there, but we've done an entire podcast on this because we've been requested information about this so many times. Is how did you 2 meet? How did you 2 start this crazy journey that you've been on together? How did this all start? And to me, it's been very serendipitous. And so I like to share it because I feel like we are in this position, at least I think that we're in this position because it was like divine prophecy. And so I always tell people, this is just, I tell Mock at least, let's give people a little Reader's Digest version of how we got to where we are, because it may give them a little bit of an inspirational boost to be activists and to get out there and do things that they may not think that they can do. Because man, 14 years ago, I would have never thought we'd be doing this and talking to you today. So Miriam and I actually worked with Miriam, and she can tell a little bit of like the background where I thought I was going to be hired for a job like many, many, many years ago. And I interviewed with her. Gosh, I don't even know. When was that, Miriam? Like
the original time on the phone would have been summer of 2007.
Okay. You remember that. That's extraordinary. So I interviewed with her at that time. She made a giant mistake in not hiring me. I don't know why.
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
It was not my call.
Whatever. But I had a really crazy, I still have a really crazy maiden name, and my maiden name is Putz, P-U-T-Z. So how can you not, how can you forget that name? Right. So years later, she saw that name, I guess, come across her Facebook page or whatever. And she looked at that and she was like, God, that name looks really familiar. And it was really weird. I guess we were in some of the same circles. And so she asked her husband, actually, before she reached out to me, but she looked at her husband and she goes, that name looks really familiar. I don't know why we're friends with some of the same people. And it turns out that I went to school with her husband from the time I was in, gosh, I think I was 8 years old and he was 7. So he's a year younger than me. Mock robbed the cradle. And so,
and you guys never dated. I always like to point out, in
thank
case
goodness.
anyone is
'Cause
worried.
yeah, that would have been completely awkward if we dated. Thank goodness I only dated older guys always. But so we actually went to school together from the time he was 7 and I was 8, and so all the way through high school. And so we ran around with the same people, and Mock saw my name and, Facebook, whatever. And so she reached out to me and was like, I think we know each other. Thank goodness that she was nosy and that she was, had the forthwith to reach out and contact me.
Well, I have to interrupt you really fast because an important detail that you're leaving out
What is that?
is that you not only went to school with my husband, you lived about 7 houses away from him.
I
So
did.
you grew up in the exact same neighborhood. And the way that I figured that out was because a friend of ours who was the best man in our wedding was friends with you.
Right.
And I was like, how is that even a thing?
It's
and
just
that's how we
crazy.
figured it out.
Right. And so she wrote me and she's like, this is just crazy. It's really weird how you went to school with my husband, blah, blah, blah. We have this job at my company that's available and you should come in and interview for it. And I was like, listen, I'm starting this other job on Monday. This is probably not going to work because I'm not going to just come in willy-nilly and interview for this job. I'm a professional. I'm not going to do that. And so she's like, but you have to. And I said, fine. And I thought, God, she's so stalky. I'll go ahead and I'll just interview for this job, or I'll come in and meet her, whatever. And I'll probably just not take the job, but it'd be nice to meet her. And I'll start my other job on Monday. I met her and I immediately thought, oh my God, we're so going to be best friends. I mean, we ended up talking for 4 or 5 hours that day. I stayed there and I ended up being completely unprofessional, calling the other position, telling him I wasn't going to come in Monday, and then taking the job with Miriam. So we worked together for a couple years. We would talk to each other about.
Wait. I'm going to jump in again.
Please do.
Okay, because another important detail about this story is that this all happened in the summer of 2008, which was right in the thick of the Obama mania, right? And so neither of us at that time before that had been particularly political or activisty. But that inspired us in many ways because we could not believe what we were seeing in terms of the absolute just starry-eyed wonder that people had about Obama. So we started working together in August of 2008 leading up to that election, and it was all we could talk about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about shoes and family too. I mean, every once in a while, but a lot of it was, most of it, I'd say 80% of it at that time was politics, which was really weird for both of us because, as Mock said, we were not very political. So we were like, this is bizarre. So I came to her one day and I was like, you know what? Because I was working as a writer at the time and she was an HR, guru. And I was like, you know what? And she's a very good writer. I was like, we should start a blog or like a website and just start writing about this stuff and doing it in a way, because at that time, back in 2008, nowadays there's a ton of these, but back in 2008, there was a need for, punditry that wasn't buttoned up and that wasn't at all wonky. And so I said, we should write things about politics and write in a way that is conversational and is very casual, and do it in a way where people, don't feel like, God, this is just so stuffy, do it in a way that we're talking right now, like chicks over, chips and salsa and margaritas, at lunch, of course. And so she was like, let's do it. And so we did. So Chicks on the Right was born in February 2009, right? Is that right? Yeah. So February 2009, it all started. And with a post about Nancy Pelosi, clapping like a monkey. And then, and then it became, we got a book deal and we got, all sorts of stuff. I'm sure you're going to correct me because I suck at the timeline, but when it comes, we ended up getting a book deal and we ended up getting a radio show.
Okay, but back up.
Okay.
Jumping in again.
Okay. Go ahead.
So our website grew very organically over a period of a few years. So between 2009 and 2012, we were growing pretty steadily just from word of mouth and people finding out about us. And in 2010, we had the foresight to start a related Facebook page, the Chicks on the Right Facebook page. And so we were having some, relatively good growth over time. And we had our first ever meet and greet in September of 2012, which was one of the best evenings of our entire life. And shortly after that, there was a post that set off all the alarm bells at Facebook. We were trailblazers in terms of being censored by Facebook.
Yeah, being shut down.
Back in January of 2013, they threatened to shut us down and in fact locked me out of our account altogether because there were a bunch of people who reported a post of mine en masse. And that publicity, because Todd Starnes picked up that story at Fox News at the time, that exploded our growth. And that's what led to us doing radio full time, and then ultimately led to our book deal.
The book
and so that's kind of the timeline.
Right. So then we got the book, and then we, and then the podcast started after we got into radio. And so it all was just it all just sort of mashed together and became the Chicks on the Right, our little tiny baby empire that we have today, which is what we have. So, and a lot of it, and I have left radio, but we still do the podcast, which we both, we're going to do it in perpetuity. We're going to do it forever and ever. Amen. And there's a lot of things I look back at all the things that we've done since 2009, and I'm in awe sometimes at the fact that so much of it was organic. Like, we didn't pay for any marketing. We never have. Just people would come. If it was sort of that whole, if you build it, they will come mentality. And we've always been like that, right? So we've always just believed in ourselves and our mission of, we believe in the country, we believe in doing what's best for our kids. We want a better country for our kids because we feel like things are in decline. And so we've just always held true to those beliefs. Miriam and I have both felt that way. A lot of people have told us, hey, you should change this, you should change that, be this way, be that way. And we've always been like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to continue to do what we do. And, we've been pretty steady. There have been a lot of people over the years who have gone away because, the people that are on Facebook and other people that have done what we do, and they've gone by the wayside and they're gone now. But we've remained, we've just always sort of kept our heads above water. And I think it's because we have always remained true to ourselves.
And I think one of our strengths is building community. And I think that actually just listening to Rosanna, and by the way, thank you, Rosanna, overdue thanks for inviting us to speak with you guys today. But I think when we were talking before we started this speaking session, Rosanna was telling us that this membership of the Conservative Women of the Mainline is growing steadily. And that's what it's all about, right? Activism is about banding people that are like-minded together, because one person can feel very alone and feel like they can't have a lot of impact. But when you have a community and you build a community, it's amazing what you can accomplish together.
Right.
And so that's always, I think, been one of our strengths is community building.
Right. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was kind of along that same vein. Like, people who are together, they feel that they feel more secure in talking about, their conservatism. One of the things that we've seen since 2009, and one of the things that breaks my heart the most, and why it builds fuel for my fire every day, is we see people that don't want to get involved, that are afraid to get involved. And we see more and more conservatives that are afraid to get involved or even say, I'm a conservative. So we'll get emails from people. This used to drive me crazy. It just like irked me to no end. But people would write us, and God bless them, they would, agree with everything that we'd say. And they'd say, I love you. I love that you say this. And I love this. And I agree with you on this. And, I say this on the radio, or say this on your podcast, or talk about this, but don't say my name, and don't say who I am. And please don't out me about this. And that, it drove me crazy, but that it also makes me really, really sad, because I'm like, why don't these people want to, say that they're conservative or say that they're Republican? And some of these were college students, And so I talked to Mock about it, and she would say stuff like, well, do you blame them? Do you blame some of them? Right. Because that's what you would come back and say to me, because we're always like devil's advocate with one another. Because she would be like, well, do you blame them? Because some of these people are getting beat up by Antifa. Some of these people are, now they're getting canceled. So do you blame these people for squelching their own conservatism and just keeping silent? and not being out and proud about being Republican, being conservative, being right wing at all. And so that's where we have to make changes, is to be able to build communities and to start being more outward, and to
find strength in numbers.
Right. Right. And I think communities like the one that, that you're in it's just so vitally important, because people feel as though they're part of a community and they can at least talk to people. We have one of those too. Of course, we have our big Facebook page, which, everybody can go to. And then we have a Facebook group. And then we have what's called an insiders group. And our insiders it's very troll free. It is troll free. It's not very, it is troll free. Like, people can go there and everybody's like-minded. It's like it's the most exclusive, safe place for chicks on the right people. And these people, like, it's so cool to watch. It's sort of like a baby that goes off and walks, it's like a toddler goes off and walks, grows up, and it becomes its own, adult. You just watch your kid grow up, right? That, to me, that's like the insiders group, because it's like a bunch of awesome, like-minded people that we've created this community, and they've taken on their own, like a kind of a life of their own, really, because they've gone off, they all meet with each other, they travel with each other, they do all sorts of cool stuff with each other. And we're very proud of that, because these are people who feel safe with one another. But then I feel like we need to build on that, right? We need to build on that and make sure that people are being outwardly concerned and not just in these groups,
Well, and it can be really scary to speak out, especially in a culture like ours is right now, where so many organizations are, releasing a lot of this indoctrination sounding critical race theory bullcrap that's kind of infiltrating not just companies, but schools, unfortunately. But the good news about it is that it seems to be, and maybe I'm just overly optimistic, but it seems to me that the tide is turning a little bit, particularly with respect to CRT, only because now the left is in a bit of a pickle, because about half of the left is trying to insist that people on the right who are nervous about CRT have no idea what we're talking about. CRT is a college level ideology and a line of thinking that's college level. And of course it's not being taught in our schools. And the other half of the left is saying, yes, it's being taught, and here's how we're going to teach it, and screw the governors who are trying to ban it, because here's how we're going to fight against it. Mm-hmm. So it's like they can't have it both ways. And I think more and more people on the right are starting to figure out this doesn't make a lot of sense. And also it's a very divisive way of thinking. And I don't want my kids to be subjected to it, which is why it goes back to Amy Jo's point, why it's so important to reach out to other people that think the same way that you do, band together and become activists. There's no more important time to do it than right now.
Right. That's the thing, is that we cannot be silent anymore, because there is this mob, right? We call them the woke mob, and it exists. And I think too many people right now are afraid of being called, names, right? We were called, I remember the first time, I don't even know if I do remember the exact first time I was called a racist, but it was
so many.
It's been so long ago, but I do remember the first couple times, right? I remember like the era of when we were first called those names, and it hurt so badly to be called those names. God, it hurt. I just remember thinking, I'm never going to make it through. I don't think I want to do this. So there have been times where I wanted to stop doing this, because I didn't want to I just thought, you know what, it'd be so much easier just to go back to medical writing and not do this. And then I could just be anonymous and people won't call me names, because I know who I am and I'm not a racist. I'm not these things that people, I'm not a sexist. I'm not all these, I'm not an ageist, whatever, all these things that people are calling me. I'm not these things, right? And all the things that they call conservatives and homophobic and all these other names, right? And giving up and apologizing and bending to the mob is exactly what they want you to do. And of course, we didn't stop. We kept going. And now the really sad thing is that those names mean absolutely nothing. They don't hurt at all, because they've dumbed down and they've watered down all of those. It's just semantics to me now. because they use them so frequently, that the left does, which is unfortunate because it takes the sting out of what is actually exists, it's real stuff. But I mean, you just can't bend to the mob. You can't do it. If you do it, then they gain power. It's like letting a bully win, right? And so this is why it's just so important for us to all recognize that every time that you stay silent, every time that you don't speak up, every time that you say, well, I mean, it's just easier for me to just sit in my house and maybe not run for that school board, not run for that office, not get involved in that activity, not be out and proud, not say something when I'm in a group of people and they're talking about this and I'm the only conservative in the group. I just don't want to ruffle any feathers. Every time you do that, they gain power. And so it's just really important for us to recognize that. And I think that's, it's just crucial right now. It's absolutely crucial, not just for us, but for our kids and our grandkids.
Especially our kids who are being force-fed a narrative by not just their schools, but by their political leaders right now, that America is inherently evil. And it's so heartbreaking, especially as a child of immigrants, as a first-generation American myself. What amazes me so much is that so many immigrants, legal immigrants to this country, have a love of America that cannot be matched by many people who were born here. And that's heartbreaking to me. But it's something that I think, coming from the parents who are both immigrants, I have a huge sense of that, because, when they became naturalized citizens in 1975, it was like one of the most momentous occasions of their lives. And so to see people just flooding across the border willy-nilly with COVID, you know what I mean? It coming through now. Add to that the fact that they have no respect for our borders or our country, but also so many US born kids hate their own country, see the United States flag as a symbol of oppression now, instead of being like the Cuban folks protesting in the street and waving it as a symbol of freedom. So there's so much work to do. And when I think about people choosing to be on the sidelines now and quiet now, you can't. You can't.
You can't. And I think, and really you can't, because we've seen a decline. I'd like to say that all of our work, listen, we've turned people. I saw one the other day, that was in our comments. And every time I see that, I go, oh my gosh, it's like the most amazing thing when somebody says I've been red pilled because of the chicks on the right, like that's the coolest thing ever. Right. When you have somebody that it was once a liberal that becomes, a conservative because of you, or they see something in you, or maybe they're a liberal still, but they're like, I'm listening to you, but we've been around since 2009. And I will tell you, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but it's not gotten better. If anything, the discourse has definitely gotten, a lot more, it's just terrible. And we're definitely more divided as a country. I think that's obvious to everybody. And there are days where I just kind of go, gosh, are we making a dent? Are we making a difference? I hope that we are. I feel like we provide a place, like some sort of a sanctuary for people to come and they can at least get information, because Lord knows it's hard to even find information, more so than it was in 2009, just good information. That's not,
but also I hope that we provide some levity,
right? Because
one of the hardest things about, one of the hardest things about this being such a divisive time is it can weigh on you, right? It can so bring you down and exhaust you to think about all the work that needs to be done. And so I hope that what we do with our morning video show and our podcast is that we present what's going on and we still maintain a way to laugh about it.
Right. And
because if you don't keep your sense of humor, it's going to be really hard to stay in this fight.
Totally. You're absolutely right. Like, do it in a human way and reach out to each other like humans, because it's crazy. It's just kind of crazy out there, but this is still the best country on the planet. The very best country. Otherwise, why would so many people be clamoring to get in here? Regardless of what the left says, right? They say it's such a terrible place, but I beg to differ, because so many people want in. Lord knows I love it. I know you do. And, we have such reverence for it. And I try to teach my children that it is the best place. And I can't imagine, I have a little girl, I have 3 kids, 2 older ones, and then my 11-year-old. And I always tell my daughter, my 11-year-old, I'm like, imagine what your life would be if you didn't live in America. Imagine what your life would be like in Saudi Arabia. Like you wouldn't be, she's a swimmer. She's at a swim meet this weekend with her daddy in San Antonio. And I think to myself, and I'll tell her and remind her, I'm like, you wouldn't be able to do that. These are the things that you take for granted as an American. And I try to remind her of that. And I don't think that we do enough of that with, young people. I don't think we do enough of that as adults. We don't remind ourselves how incredibly fortunate we are to live in this country, and especially as women, we're incredibly fortunate.
It's
worth fighting for. Absolutely.
So I think that's the main message of today.
Right. I'd love it if people have questions. We usually get a lot of questions from people, personal, professional.
Let's start questions in the chat, guys. I have a few for you ladies.
Sure.
I know I've told you how much we're doing locally and then across the state of PA. What would your suggestions be? And I know running for school board, and there's a number of us that have worked so hard to try to get people to run locally. What would, from what you've seen and from being on a national forum, what would you say is important for people to get involved in on a local level?
School boards.
Okay.
Without question, school boards. I think
and city councils.
Yeah,
city councils also.
Yeah, city councils are good too, but liberals have completely infiltrated our schools, and school boards are all liberals. I mean, granted, you'll be able to find like here and there'll be a conservative here or there, but school boards. Run for school boards.
Agreed. And we've done that. And just so you ladies are aware, the conservative women, we've worked with a ton of different districts throughout PA to try to get school board members, because I have to tell you, my head was in the sand. I don't even think I realized how important that was until all of a sudden I started seeing white privilege surveys. And, I even fought for little things like that, the not doing the Pledge of Allegiance every day, and it's in their bylaws. So I think that's fantastic to even mention to the group how important the school boards are. We have to change them out across the country.
And another thing, another thing I was going to say is also make sure that you are volunteering to do the polls, to make sure that just to go talk to your election administrators in your counties and volunteer to work the polls and be election officers and just
You're absolutely right.
Because just to make sure that we are also involved in our election process and we're not just talking about it, because we talk a lot about election integrity. Make sure you're getting involved in your actual election processes and you go there and you work the polls. Yeah.
So let's start the questions coming, ladies and gentlemen on the call. Cinda's asking a question. Why do you think liberals believe the lie of socialism, tax and spend politics, and systematic welfare?
Well, because it's like ice cream versus broccoli, right?
Yeah.
We teach all about personal responsibility and having to work hard to earn your way. And the opposite message on the left is, we're going to take care of you. Nothing is your fault. You're a victim. Mm-hmm. It's a much easier pill to swallow.
Right.
And they're also, when you think about the amount of information channels that the left owns when it comes to music, pop culture, Hollywood, the university system, all of the mainstream media outlets, save Fox News and OAN and Newsmax.
Right.
I mean, when you think about how many platforms they have completely taken a hold of, we've got our work cut out for us, and they really don't, right? It's a very easy, they have so many outlets to spread their propaganda that it becomes much more in your face than the alternate message.
Annie asked a question. Thanks so much for your time. I'm 23. By the way, Annie is very active, and she is 23, and she's fantastic in our group.
Love that. Love that.
Thanks so much for your time. I'm 23 and working to create a community of young conservatives. I'm currently focusing on building an influence on social media and posting regularly through videos of the issues. What do you suggest to gain traction and build my brand online to increase reach on our message?
Well, TikTok, obviously. Hello.
Not necessarily. You don't have
kidding.
to do TikTok.
I'm totally kidding.
That's a really good question, because branding is something that Amy Jo has a huge passion about, but it's also something that you need to define for yourself, right? Like, so our brand came about because of who we are as people and who we are together. So that created on its own, organically, a brand that expresses our friendship. Like, when we're talking about politics, we're doing it from the lens of us being best friends and having a common interest and having a similar sense of humor. So you have to figure out who you are as a young conservative at 23, and decide what are the avenues that are attention grabbers. So whether you're sharing funny memes, whether you're creating like hilarious GIFs of things that resonate, those are the kinds of things right now, especially little tiny bits of information, right? Because people have no attention span anymore. To the extent that you can share those things in bite-sized little pieces that can be shared by more people, I think that's really helpful.
Bite size is good, but Annie, my advice would be just be yourself. Just be yourself.
You gotta figure out who that is.
And just be yourself, and you'll be great.
Sarah's asking a question, and I know we did speak about this, but it would be great to formalize this as well. What is a good way to counter leftist argument on CRT? It's not being taught in grade schools. Often they mockingly claim we don't know that what CRT really is.
I got into a fight with Joy Reid about this on Twitter, you guys.
That's why you go.
And that is exactly what she said to me, is that she tried to say, you don't even know what CRT is. And the way that you counter that is by knowing exactly what it is. And so as much as it pained me, I read Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, because I wanted to know, I wanted to feel what it feels like to be a person who actually reads that entire thing and understands how warped it is, so that I can counter it in a way that makes sense. And a great resource I would suggest to everybody is, if you haven't followed Barry Weiss's Substack yet, it's barryweiss.substack.com. So Barry Weiss used to be an editor for the New York Times, and then she left very loudly, right? Because she was talking about how conservatives don't have a voice, or how the New York Times was so biased. So she has been doing a lot. She's one of the people, for example, who helped bring to light some of those teachers in those really hoity-toity New York private schools who left because of this very thing. So she's bringing their stories more publicity, and she's got just a wealth of knowledge on her website about fighting this specific thing, because CRT is big right now and it's a huge topic of conversation. But again, the optimist in me sees this becoming, the tide is turning on this, because so many parents have woken up to what's going on.
Yeah. Marianne, I agree with you on that. I know that I've spoken to you, and I know that I'm going to send you guys some articles. But we have, in the different Easttown School District, we have America First fighting for us to actually get the curriculum, because we want to show the community that's what CRT is. Regardless of what the school board and administration is stating, that is what CRT is. I would definitely suggest as well, all districts, all locations actually get what their curriculum is and how much it's spending, and show them when they're talking about oppressors and oppression, that's what critical race theory is. It is in our grammar schools. So that's what we're trying to do here locally. And a number of us are in different school districts, and we're working together so that we can, start to have the bubble start to burst. I completely agree with you. I'm actually seeing some succession because of parents all over the country.
Yeah. And this, again, to Mary's point, this will be a huge turning point in the next election. People are totally waking up, because we have been asleep on this as conservatives for 10, 20 years. We've just we've been a little complacent when it comes to the schools, because we've been very trusting, thinking, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Now we're like, holy crap, everything's not fine. And now that everybody's waking up, things will start turning. It will start turning.
And I would also recommend too, for parents out there, to definitely not get complacent, particularly if you're in a state like Texas, Florida, where you've got a great governor who's saying to you, we're banning CRT and it's not allowed. That that's meaningless. I mean, I appreciate it, but it's absolutely meaningless because there are so many radical teachers who are determined and very open about their determination to keep right on implementing it in their curriculum. So the most important thing, other than getting involved with your school boards, is that you're telling your kids what to listen for, right? So if you have kids that are old enough, I mean, well, they have to be, right? Because K through 12, this is being infiltrated, and you have to figure out the language that's being used and use it to counter the argument, so that at home you're saying to your kid, listen, you might have a teacher that's going to tell you about slavery, and they might use words like white privilege. Let's talk about that, so that your kids are ready and they're not blindsided when they hear that stuff in schools. They know what you've taught them at home. That has to be something that they're hearing from you at home.
Right. Amen to that. Yeah.
That's great. That's excellent advice. Do we have any further questions, team, for these lovely ladies with phenomenal advice for us? I would ask you guys one more question. It's interesting. I know we're talking about the tide turning, and I think that even Democrats and independents that I have met, it's so funny because I don't really have a lot of friends anymore that are Democrats and independents, but they actually do see what's going on and the wokeism throughout the United States. Do you see any tide or any suggestions for us to start to talk to people in our communities that are Democrats and independents about, maybe even getting more people to vote Republican in the upcoming elections, and obviously 2022 here, governor and Senate races are so important. I'm sure you guys, I know you've had that on your show before, but any suggestions for us on a local level to be able to get to change the tide?
To get people to vote Republican? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean, even getting new registrations for Republican.
Right. Well, getting people engaged to vote, that is a tough one. I think a lot of people in the last election I think the last election and the election before, I think there are people who just say, I don't care either way. I don't really care. I'm just going to stay at home. So getting those people off the couch, off their butts, and to vote, you have to get them excited about something that I guess it pertains to their life specifically to get them off the couch. So what is that thing, right? If you can try to tie something to them specifically, because that's really what people care about, right? Is they care about themselves and their families. So what is that thing? What is that thing that makes them excited to go to the polls? What's the issue, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. What's that issue? And from a local standpoint, I don't know what that looks like locally for you and for your community, or even from a state standpoint. I'm not really sure.
Well, we're in the glorious PA swing mail-in state, so we're we have a lot of luck on our side there. So obviously, with a number of us working with local candidates, even encouraging people to do mail-in, I just think it's a must for the next election until it's changed out.
Like for me, like I live in Texas. So you start, there are even a lot of people who are complacent and may stay at home, whatever, but you start, telling them, hey, this is just an example. I'm just throwing this out here. If you start talking about your Second Amendment rights are going to be, in jeopardy, then people may be like, well, I may go vote. That's something that's
I would also say that in terms of getting people engaged, I think the most important way to do that is off social media and face to face. Like start small, right? When you start in your own family, your own friend group, and you're having conversations as human beings face to face, it's such a different thing than having conversations on social media where everybody's keyboard warriors and they're trying to out insult each other. When you're face to face with other humans and you're talking about real issues that impact you personally, like can you believe what we're paying for gas right now? And start that ball rolling, so that if this is somebody who's not engaged and they're like, yeah, what the hell is going on, and they genuinely don't know, that's your way in, right? Like that's your way in to explain, well, I'll tell you what's going on. The policies that Joe Biden has right now are causing inflation across the board. Prices on everything are going up. And then those conversations that begin organically correctly start people thinking. And when people start thinking and then start to do their own research, they become engaged, because how can you not right now?
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed. Yeah. We have one more question, ladies, and then we'll wrap this up for Saturday night. We have from Perry. What are your favorite sources for credible news, so that we don't have to always do a deep dive to make certain that they're not being fooled into falso stories?
Chicksontheright.com.
Exactly.
I love it. Yes. Chicksontheright.com is a great place to go. It's funny that I like going to Daily Wire. I love Daily Wire.
Yeah.
I love them. And then you're going to laugh at me for this, but every single day I go to Daily Mail. You
have to take that with a grain of salt, though. Like, don't believe
I know, I totally
do on
the
Daily Mail.
But it's mostly because I want to know who's cutting a nice figure. I want to know. They're so cheeky over there at the Daily Mail. They're very cheeky. The reason I like that is because they have everything quickly. That's why I like them. And then, and I like Newsmax, and I like OAN, and then I like Breitbart, and but then I also go to all the other whack jobs too. Like, yesterday I was watching MSNBC. I was watching Rachel Maddow just to see what she was yapping about, and I lasted about 5 minutes because she was talking about Trump. I was like, these people cannot stop. I give it a chance. I try to give everything a chance. But then, sometimes they just make me nauseated, but I try.
But I think the most important thing too, is to always have a couple, 3, 4 different sources. So don't always just rely, even if it's chicksontheright.com, don't just rely on that one place, right? Trust and verify, and use as many sources as you can to verify a story, especially because, and I'm not trying to be all Jen Psaki over here and say there's a ton of misinformation out there, but there's far too many people, for example, who are like, Babylon Bee said that this is happening, and they don't know that that's satire, right? So it's really
satire. What?
It's really important to check and make sure, and especially if you're on a site that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm reading, go to the About tab and see what that site is all about, because chances are you might see an About section that says we're a parody site or whatever. So it's always just really important to check your sources.
Yeah, it is. Check and
Well, this was fantastic, ladies. Thank you so much for speaking to the Conservative Women of the Mainline. It's such a pleasure. We'll be in touch, and I'll send you both the video if you want that.
Great. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.